Anirodhamanutpadamanuच्छedamashashvatam Anekarthamananarthamanagamam Yah pratitya samutpadam prapanchopashamam shivam Deshayamasa sambuddhastam vande vadatam varam Nasvato napi parato nadvabhyam napyahetutah Utpanna jatu vidyante bhava kvachana kechana. For one moment, let us rest completely in the sense of universal Maitri, in a state of Maitri for all beings. We are now in the 4th chapter of the Dharmapada. This chapter is called the Puppha Vagga or Pushpa Varga in Sanskrit. In Pali, those of you who are interested in the language aspect, some of the consonants of Sanskrit are pulled together. So for example, the word Dharma becomes Dhamma in Pali, and Pushpa becomes Puppha. It's a little strange for those who are used to the Sanskrit sound. Similarly, Varga becomes Vagga in Pali. But once we know these small changes, it is almost the same language. So let us begin with the first verse, and then you will also understand why it is called the Pushpa Varga, the chapter about the flowers. Ko imam patavim vichesati, yamalokam cha imam sadevakam, ko dhammapadam sudesitam kusalo puppam iva pachesati. The Buddha asks a rhetoric question. Who will seek to understand this earth, the world of Yama, the god of death, along with the Devas, the luminous beings? Who will seek to investigate this well-taught Dharmapada like a skillful person would seek to understand a flower? Who will seek to understand this earth, the world of Yama, the god of death, along with the Devas, the luminous beings? Who will seek to investigate this well-taught Dharmapada like a skillful person would seek to understand a flower? Most people walk past a beautiful flower and find it nice, while unappreciative of its astounding beauty and deeply complex fabric. The arrangement of its petals, the structure, the fine structure of it, if you have ever looked at a flower in detail. Others even might walk past the flower and remain completely ignorant of its exquisite loveliness. We have a rose garden not so far away from our home, and even in the depth of winter, there are still some roses there, something very beautiful. On another occasion, I recall, a couple of years ago, I was invited to join some Indian gentlemen who were on a visit to the Basel Art, which is a very special art fair in Switzerland. The artists among you might have heard about this. It is considered one of the most important fairs for modern art and also some older art. So we were attending this fair and came to some of the most exquisite paintings, exquisite pieces. And of course, I have no understanding of art, yet I could appreciate somehow that there is some special depth there. And then a lady came along who apparently was very wealthy, I assume, and she then contacts the person in charge there and says, I want to buy this. And the person said the price, which is very expensive. And then the person asked her, why would you like to buy this? Because I think he wanted to hear some appreciation or some depth. And then the lady just said, I think it's nice. It will fit in my living room. Something like that. So here too, someone who doesn't appreciate depth will find a beautiful flower nice, or perhaps even walk past it. But those who have some depth will seek to understand this world, truly understand it, not just go through this world, not just go through this life. Moreover, they will seek to try to also understand the afterlife. Of course, it is culturally different. Different cultures have different descriptions of the afterlife, but there are some basic commonalities, that there are other worlds, other realms. In Sanskrit, the beings who live there are known as devas, luminous beings. And one is reborn into those realms the same way that one is reborn here, according to the Buddha. If it is difficult to imagine rebirth in another realm, consider what is the probability, or rather how strange is it that we have been born here, in this very strange world, and with a very strange body. 5 fingers on this side, 5 fingers on the other. Why not 4? Or why not 6? Right? So it's very strange, everything. If you look at it from some distance, and if we understand this world to be a realm, one particular world, it becomes easier to understand why the great meditators in visions perceived other worlds, other realms, and said that just as we can be born here, we can also be reborn there. Many people pass through this life like in a hypnotic dream, driven, impelled by their emotions, their cultural conditionings. If you attended last week's brilliant session with Siddharthaji, he talked about conditioning a lot. The conditioning that arises through the experiences we make, that leaves a strong impression and forms the way our next experiences occur. In many cases, we are so conditioned that we simply cannot experience something objectively or outside that conditioning which we have. Very rarely do people wake up and have an actual look at the experience they are undergoing. Here there is a story that some of the monks and nuns of the Buddha had been visiting a new area, a new region. You see, the Buddha was very fond of traveling by foot all across the northern part of India. I had a look at a map that outlines all the places he was prone to visiting during 45 years after his enlightenment. As far as Mathura and as far as Gaya to the east, Nalanda to the east, and Nepal as well, Ayodhya, all these cities that we are still aware of today, Benares, all these were visited by the Buddha and his disciples. So in any case, they had come to a new region, and the disciples were admiring the external world, describing it in detail. So in the next discourse, the Buddha used that to tell them, my dears, if only you looked at your internal world with the same detail that you are looking at the external world, you would discover all the negative states inside you and all the limiting states inside you, all the selfishness. But nowadays, most people do not even look at the external world in detail. And why is that? I believe it is because of a very magical device which looks like this. We have, in some sense, become married to these devices, so we're not even looking at the external world anymore, let alone the internal world. So now, having asked this question, who indeed will seek to understand the earth? The Buddha answers the question, Se ko patavim vichesati, yamalokam cha imam sadevakam, Se ko dhammapadam sudesitam, kusalo puppam iva pachesati. A genuine student will seek to understand this earth, the world of Yama, the god of death, along with the devas, the luminous beings. A genuine student will seek to investigate this well-taught Dharmapada, like a skillful person would seek to understand a flower. The word for student here in Pali is seko, which is related to the word seek, a seek, and also to the word shishya in Sanskrit. A genuine student. So what we have to ask ourselves here is, are we ready to be genuine students? Rather than always want to be teachers or always feeling we already know. It is one of the worst qualities I feel in modern times, is that there is always this very quick sense of we already know. There are like two extremes. The one extreme is, I don't know anything. I am so ignorant. I am so useless. I can't know anything and I don't know anything and I never will. You see, that's the one extreme. And the other extreme is, oh, I sort of already know all this. And neither extreme is the characteristic of a genuine student. A genuine student has a sense of what they know and what they don't know, and thus will put the teachings of the Buddha into practice after understanding them. Here, before we move to the next verse, I want to give you a little bit of an insight into how, in the Buddha's explanations, the world of Yama plays a role. Yama is a deity, is a divine being who is in charge of the process of death and of weighing the good and negative states a person has had during their lifetime. Yama is surrounded by the Yamadutas, the messengers of Yama, and these are said to collect a person at the time of their death. And then the person's deeds are weighed up against each other. It is like he's like the accountant of our deeds and our states. And then, if we have cultivated a lot of auspicious, benevolent, positive states, we are released into a better existence. And if we have cultivated a lot of negativity, a lot of negative states, a lot of harm to others, then a lower or worse existence awaits us. This is the belief, this is the context of understanding this earth, when the Buddha says we must understand this earth, but also the world of Yama. What he means is we must understand that our actions have consequences, that our life is not just random, our deeds are not random, but have consequences. Now the next verse is about how to overcome the fear of that consequence already while we live. Penupamam gayamimam viditva marichi dhammam abhisambudhano chetvana marassa papuppakani adassanam machurajassa gacche. Understanding this body to be impermanent, like foam, having realized that it is like a mirage, having cropped the flower-tipped arrows of desire, one should make himself invisible to the king of death. That's Yama. Understanding this body to be impermanent like foam, having realized that it is like a mirage, having cropped the flower-tipped arrows of desire, one should make himself invisible to the king of death. Like in the ancient Greek world of gods, the god of desire Kamadeva in Sanskrit, wields a flower bow with flower-tipped arrows. And these are known as selfishness or selfish confusion, desire, anger or irritation, pride or superiority, and envy or inferiority. And with these arrows, desire captures our whole being and shakes us up. The Buddha compares the body to be impermanent or fleeting like foam. Foam arises and ceases moment to moment on the ocean. Similarly, new bodies arise and cease moment to moment. Every single day, billions of animals pass away. Around 3 billion fish are said to pass away every day, and 200 million animals on land, mostly for the food of humans, and also 150 to 200,000 humans who die a natural death or from other causes. And daily new beings are born. So when we look at this from an eagle's eye perspective, in sort of an increased speed, it means that all these bodies which are emerging all the time are like bubbles of foam emerging and subsiding back into the ocean of existence. And our own body is one of these bubbles. By meditating or by considering this, we become serious about this existence of ours. We don't spend it only watching Netflix or scrolling through Facebook or Instagram. And here there is a story that there was a monk who had joined the Buddha's order, and he had received some meditation instruction from the Buddha and went to a nearby forest to practice. But although he tried really hard, he didn't make much progress. He was concentrating intensively, but he didn't make much progress. And he felt that he needed to go back to the Buddha for further instruction. And on his way back, he saw a mirage. A mirage happens when the sunlight shines onto a flat area and we suddenly see something that's not really there. And that struck him. This was just an appearance arising from a combination of sunlight and water, but it looked so real for a moment. And then he remembered the teachings on impermanence, that the Buddha describes the body and our whole being as utterly impermanent. So, nearby, he sat down on the banks of a river, underneath a tree, and simply observed the flow of the river, moment to moment, seeing the impermanent waves and the foam rising and ceasing and rising and ceasing, closely taking that river as an example of our own river of experience. He then observed the river of experience, the body sensations, the emotions as they rise and cease, thoughts as they rise and cease, the breath as it rises and falls, moment to moment. And that was his meditation practice. Practicing like that, he became realized. And when the Buddha came to know of that, he spoke about this verse which we just heard, understanding the body to be impermanent like foam. I think it's a wonderful example. We too can practice exactly like that. We can take some distance from the turbulent ups and downs, the rising and the falling of our body sensations, of our emotions, of our thoughts, of our breath. And we can see how, as in a river, everything is flowing moment to moment. And when we do so, we gain stability. We do not hold on so much to the particular emotions or the particular states that we happen to have at that moment. Thus, meditation on the impermanence as in the flow of a river is a very powerful tool to come out of rigid states. What are rigid states? A strong sense of identity. This is what I am. This is what I'm not. Is a very rigid state. And depending on what the conditions are, that strong sense of identity can lead to suffering when it is very rigid. But by witnessing it, it can loosen up a little bit. It can become less solid and more workable. We could say sometimes our being is like a figure from clay that has become quite rigid already. It's become quite dried up. So, to meditate on impermanence is to reverse that and to bring it back to the condition of wet clay, which can be molded and formed. Puppani heva pachinantam bhyasatta manasam naram suttam gamam mahoghova machu adaya gacchati. A person who is merely gathering flowers with an attached mind, death will sweep him away like a great flood, engulfing a sleeping village. A person who is merely gathering flowers with an attached mind, death will sweep him away like a great flood, engulfing a sleeping village. Here the flowers represent our human experiences. if we merely go through life, accumulating one experience after the next, with ever increasing attachment, it is like someone gathering flowers rather than examining and investigating their truth. At some point, the flood of the end will engulf us, will overcome us. And then what did we truly gain? We might have worked intensely towards enriching ourselves, having a big bank account, or having nice cars, having a good home, and that's all fine. But if we have dedicated all our experiences in life merely to collecting things, then it is like someone who's gathered flowers with an attached mind, and then at some point those flowers wither. Those flowers will remain for 1 or 2 or 3 days. If we water them, put them in water, and if not, then they will wither even faster. So it is the same with the experiences of life. At some point, the body becomes older. There is more proneness to illnesses or disease. Sometimes the mind becomes more troubled, and everything we have accumulated is then meaningless. Moreover, the whole process passes very quickly. I've told many of you this before, I believe, that my grandmother turned 96, and one of the last things she told me when we had a very good conversation was that life passes in the blink of an eye. When I heard that, I was quite impressed, quite astounded that she would say that at the age of 96. Passes in the blink of an eye. And I believe that those of you who are older will appreciate this. I'm sure you will agree that there is a deep truth in that. So the teaching here of the Buddha is to be serious. Serious doesn't mean we can't be happy, but to take it seriously. Use this time that we have. And there's an interesting story told here, which of course is very fantastic, but it is interesting. There was a lady called Patipujika Kumari, and she was from Savatthi, from Shravasti in Sanskrit. It's close to Ayodhya. And she married at the age of 16 and had 4 sons. She was very virtuous and generous. She loved to make offerings of food and fulfill the needs of the monks and nuns. She would often go to the monastic gardens and clean them and fill the pots and jars with water and perform other service. And she had a special quality which in Pali is called Jatisara knowledge. That is the intuition that she remembered her previous life, her previous existence. And interestingly, it was not in this world, but it was in a Deva world. It was a higher realm, and there was a Deva who had been her husband in that higher realm. His name was Malabhari. And she remembered that she had passed away in that higher realm, because in those realms we also pass away. She had passed away there when all of them were in the garden, in a beautiful garden, a divine garden, plucking and picking flowers. So she remembered this from her previous life. And every time when she made offerings to the monks and the nuns, or when she did anything auspicious, any good action, she would always pray that she would be reborn back into that realm as the wife of her previous husband. This was all the time her aspiration. And one day, of course, Patipujika fell ill and passed away that same evening. And her ardent wish came true. She was reborn in that world. And now the interesting part is this, that in that world, when one day passes, 100 years pass in the human world. So time is relative. And Malabhari and his other friends were still in the garden because many years had passed in this world. She spent a whole life in this world. But in that world, not even a day had passed, perhaps just 15 hours or so. And Patipujika was barely missed by them. So when she rejoined them, Malabhari asked her, "Where have you been the whole morning?" They hadn't even realized that she had really been gone. So she told him about her passing away in that realm, from that realm, her rebirth into the human world, her marriage, how she had given birth to 4 sons, how a whole life had transpired, and how she was now finally back. So when the monks and nuns in this world learned about her death, they were very sad, and they went to the Buddha and reported it. And the Buddha told them this because he knew that with his divine intuition. And he told them that the life of beings is very brief. Therefore, we should make use of it. Puppani heva pachinantam bhyasatta manasam naram atittam eva kamesu antako kurute vasam. This is similar to the previous verse. A man or person who is merely gathering flowers with an attached mind, utterly dissatisfied with those pleasures, he will come under the sway of death. A person who is merely gathering flowers with an attached mind, utterly dissatisfied with those pleasures, he shall come under the sway of death. It is all about understanding that the pleasures we accumulate or the experiences we accumulate can be very beautiful. They can be wonderful. We can appreciate them like beautiful flowers, but we should do so not with deep attachment. Otherwise, death will overwhelm us, or even old age, or not even old age. I'm not that old, but I keep telling Tripuraji that my body is aching and all these things. So it starts quite early with some people. Yathapi bhamaro puppam vannagandham ahetayam paleti rasam adaya evam game muni chare. Beautiful simile. Like a bee departs after having extracted the flower's nectar without adopting its color or fragrance, thus a muni or sage should stroll about in the town. Like a bee departs after having extracted the flower's nectar without adopting its color or fragrance, thus a muni or sage should stroll about in the town. The town of the world is filled with the flowers of experiences, but we should be like bees that extract the nectar, we make the experience, we appreciate it, we are grateful for it, we take out the positive, but we don't let the whole of the experience change our color, our fragrance. We allow our awareness, our consciousness to remain pure and not sink into the depth of the experiences, and we don't let them define us. We have the experiences. We are not the experiences. We have the states that occur to us, the states of the body, kaya, the states of the emotions, vedana in the Buddha's language, the states of the mind, citta, the states of phenomena appearing to us, known as citta dhamma. These are the 4 types of experiences that occur. We have these, but we are not these experiences. We have them. They occur to us. So we don't have to sink into them. And like this, always remembering the impermanence of all the experiences, we can stroll about in the town or village of the world without letting the qualities of the world take hold of us. And just one last one, then we will conclude. Naparesam vilomani, naparesam kata katam, attanova avakkeya katani akatani cha. No one should look at the improper deeds of others, what they have or haven't done, what they have or haven't done. One should look at one's own deeds, or rather, one should look at oneself, what one has and hasn't done. No one should look at the improper deeds of others, what they have or haven't done. One should look at oneself, what one has and hasn't done. Meaning, do not take these teachings as a reason to judge others. Don't judge others. Don't say, oh, see how attached they are and how free from attachment I am. Investigate your own deeds. Investigate your own mind. So now if anyone has any questions, you are free to ask. Someone remarked that scientists calculate that the probability of any of us existing right now is 1 in 400 trillion. There you go. So it is quite precious to sit here in front of your screen. And then someone humorously adds, with these viruses around, the probability is almost 1 in infinity. Yes, indeed. So does anyone have a question? Someone says, could you repeat verse 2? Yes. Verse 2 was the answer to the question in verse 1. Who will seek to understand this earth, the world of Yama, the god of death, along with the Devas? So the response was, a genuine student will seek to understand this earth, the world of Yama, along with the Devas. A genuine student will seek to investigate this well-taught Dharmapada like a skillful person would seek to understand a flower. So the request of the Buddha is to be genuine students and not teachers, always. That includes us. I always consider myself a student. So then, with no questions, I hope that you take the impermanence, anitya, that all the phenomena we experience, all these experiences, inside, outside, whatever it is, as impermanent. Understand it to be anitya. And in that sense, also like a mirage. It is a temporary appearance, but not forever. And someone asks, how can we make young people understand impermanence? It's an interesting question. When we are younger, it is like our body, our hormones give different information to our minds. We don't have that sense of impermanence yet. When someone is 20, 25 even, that sense is not really there. There is always this sense of this is going to go on forever. And I think 30 is sort of the threshold. That's what I have observed. When people turn 30, there is a sudden, there's a sudden sense of, oh dear, maybe these grumpy masters of ancient India are right. Maybe this is impermanent after all. So sometimes it just takes time. And of course, loss automatically makes young people understand impermanence. Perhaps telling stories, perhaps visiting elderly people, perhaps not shielding the youth from the reality. Maybe that helps. And then someone says, Patipujika's story was quite interesting. Wasn't she tied to the desire of Deva birth? Oh yes, absolutely. She was tied to that desire of being born in that higher realm, but that's also not necessarily a good thing. Because, you see, in the ancient Indian view, she will be born in that higher realm, but then she will again come back here or somewhere else. And this will continue forever unless she really comes out of the cycle. This is called samsara, the cycle of birth and rebirth. So yes, her wish to be born in that higher realm is not necessarily something positive. Absolutely. But the description there is just to say how fleeting the life here is, even though it seems long. There's a similar story about Narada and Vishnu. We can tell at a different time. Then someone says, sometimes it makes me sad if I meditate about impermanence, sometimes also happy. Yes, absolutely, absolutely. But you see, we have to take the reality seriously. This is all, the Buddha's teaching is always about yathartha drishti, seeing the reality of things. not deluding ourselves by distracting our minds. And when we see impermanence is simply reality, then it can also become a door to freedom. Then we know that the states we are experiencing themselves are impermanent. Thus, the sadness or melancholy that comes up in you is also impermanent. So you can then see that clearly, and it passes away too. You see, so that which initially perhaps was the source of your melancholy or the source of your sadness also becomes the remedy. It also becomes the medicine for your sadness. To know that the sadness too is impermanent. And remember always, your true nature is not impermanent. Even in the Buddha's teaching, sometimes people say that the Buddha didn't teach about a true nature. That is just a misunderstanding. The Buddha definitely taught that in our innermost heart, we have our true nature. And that is like space. That is like the sky. It is infinite. It is unbounded. It is pure light from the beginning. Absolute purity. And that is not impermanent. So we can realize that everything here is impermanent, and we can then work towards realizing that which is not impermanent. And thus we make good use of life. Let us finish with just 1 minute again of Maitri, loving kindness, as the Buddha says, for all beings, to the front, to the back, to the right, to the left, in all the directions, without exception. May all beings be happy. May everyone become free from suffering. I wish you a wonderful weekend. Maintain the awareness that the Buddha teaches, maintain the Maitri that he teaches, and everything will be better. See you next time. Namaste, Hari Om.